I actually haven't even gotten to speak to you about the tour, about Charlie, about anything. Do you plan on going still on the tour? Did you guys have any hesitation? Was that a discussion?
Not a second.
Zero. Yeah, we'll absolutely be there. Yeah, you can just put us around you in chairs. It'll be fine.
We have Defend Megyn t-shirts on.
You guys are awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you so much. We haven't had anybody try to cancel on us so far. Like, it's amazing that all of our guests. And as I was reading your names, it's like, I thought of Charlie because it's like, he came on the show almost as frequently as you guys did. And our relationship goes back further, but he was here almost as often as you guys are. And it's like, I feel the way about his loss the way I'd feel if, God forbid, something happened to one of you. It's like, we don't hang out a lot. We don't go for dinners a lot, but we know each other. We've spent hours and hours. I can't think of a lot of friends I have spent this much time with. If you look at the number of times you've come on, let's just pick the last 6 months, like we spent election together, the election night, all of it. These relationships you form with the people who you interview and spend time with in this space, they're real. They're actually really meaningful. And I'm still so just upset about Charlie and just reading all the leftist freakouts about him. I love National Review. They have a little TDS over there, but it's fine. I love them. And Jeff Blahar wrote a great piece. He predicted this. Okay, listen to this. He wrote this earlier, before the Charlie assassination. It was after poor Irina was murdered on the train. And he wrote this: I fear we're on the verge of a great societal breakdown, one right out of the late 60s and early 70s, and we are not prepared for it. Something wicked this way comes. The atrocity in Minneapolis is but one articulated edge in a far larger fractal pattern of violence and madness creeping across our landscape. Once the progress was imperceptibly slow, but technology has proven to be the accelerant. The threat is pre-political, generational, and perhaps even civilizational. The worst are full of passionate intensity. Things are falling apart, crumbling at both the margins and the center of our societal self-conception. What comes next? I suppose we'll find out. My God. So he writes this, and then he writes the following, which I want to kick it off with you guys on. I want to express my burning contempt for the social media charade that I and every other conservative just had to endure. The experience of watching Charlie murdered and then watching vast numbers of propagandists and people who know better tell us that Kirk was actually shot from a far-right Groyper or a Nick Fuentes fan or a MAGA true believer, anyone but a person associated with a left-coded cause, which Occam's razor already suggested was the likely reality. As each new detail trickled out and the killer's transgender associations became clearer and clearer, the hysterical spin and assertions of blunt unreality mounted. Cynical prose began inserting outright lies into the mix as partisans took up their work and used it in desperate, craven attempts to either spin facts in ridiculous ways, his parents are Republicans, or simply pretend the facts weren't facts at all. All of it was done with the intent of trying to will into existence, through the spread of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, an alternate narrative whose intended moral calculus amounted to, in so many words, Charlie Kirk was killed by his own team, and this is actually your fault. So no, I'm not about to move on just yet. Totally agree with and endorse every word of that. The gaslighting that we have been subjected to over the past 5 or 6 days is infuriating, and it's like even more so, it's like unsettling. It's actually kind of deeply unsettling. Your thoughts?
Before we even get started, Megyn, I just want to say on behalf of the boys, since they're going to elbow me in the throat before all of that, we watched you as you were struggling with this on air, and just kudos for you for elbowing your way through it. I know how I can only begin to imagine how rough that is. And then also for you doing what Ben Shapiro did. Ben, who's not a big F-bomb dropper, but his response to this, like yours, is the correct one. I am going to go in public and speak. And we are very, very happy to go with you, not because we always agree with you, but precisely because we always don't.
Right.
Kind of the point. Which is something that Charlie Kirk exuded in his bones. So that's the throat clear. Thank you for all of that.
Thank you, Matt.
terrifying to watch how many people have talked themselves into an entire narrative. Heather Cox Richardson, I think the most popular Substacker.
Yeah.
Out there, incredibly successful, an academic of some sort, just sort of out there stating as kind of fact now that I guess they're saying he's a left groiper. It's a new category that I'm unaware of. And there's a whole category.
Groypers, just for the audience, and groypers is a term that is generally used to describe these Nick Fuentes fans. Nick Fuentes, who is sort of described as one of the OG modern day online white supremacists. And it's got some whole lineage with these like frogs, Pepe the Frog, whatever. In any event, it's like a white supremacist who follows Nick Fuentes, a groyper.
Yes. So there are people who are going to talk themselves up into that, and there's even some preliminary survey data that that is going to be an epistemic bubble that's not getting popped. There's going to be people like, he was definitely on the right. The same wisdom applies to absolutely every tragedy, violent act of violence, especially if it's politicized. It's okay to wait a beat. It's okay not to state with 1,000% certainty X, but please don't state with 1,000% certainty the opposite of X. And it is revealing to see who is doing that right now. Don't have to do that. We can demand better of ourselves and of the people and the institutions that we consume with in media.
Yeah, I just second what Matt said, and also to say kudos to our friend and friend of all three of ours, Jeff Blair from National Review, for a great piece that I hadn't read. So thanks for reading that. I mean, there's been, I don't even know how to begin this, because my brain hasn't stopped worrying and whirling since it happened. And, in seeing you, Megyn, do that in real time and pivot very quickly. It's not a podcast, people. This isn't a podcast. We release things. It's just an hour here and there. I mean, reacting to the news in that way was, I think, pretty helpful to a lot of people. It certainly was for me. But one of the things that's really interesting about this that nobody really has pointed out is that this is actually a new thing. Why is this different than all of the other examples people talk about? Minneapolis keeps coming up in this political point scoring. It's never okay to do, acts of violence towards politicians. That should be obvious. But it is kind of interesting that this is the only one I can think of an act of violence against a pundit. That doesn't happen very much. It's very, very unique. I can think of one that we were doing an episode of The Fifth Column with our listeners, talking to them on Zoom, and I thought of Alan Berg, who's probably totally forgotten about by people, who was a talk radio host in Colorado, I think, who was killed by neo-Nazis. He was Jewish, and that was enough. And he had attacked these Nazis, and they killed him. But that was the only one I could really think of. And I think that was actually specific too, about him attacking a specific person, specific people responding. Whereas this was, somebody who had ideas. And at the end of this conversation, at the end of all of these conversations, when you have these, what was on the casings, the bullet casings? What did they mean? What did he say? What did he say to his friends? All of this stuff, which is trying to divine the politics of this psychotic shooter. It would seem pretty obvious to me, because he killed Charlie Kirk, what his politics were.
Back to the Occam's razor.
That's the Occam's razor. He killed Charlie Kirk. He did not take a shot at some sort of left-wing pundit or left-wing politician. And at the end of the day, every conversation should start and begin with one sentence. He was killed for what he believed. He was killed for what he said. Full stop. Why are you saying, and I keep on having these conversations, Kmele, Matt, and I had this conversation, we immediately reacted to it the day that it happened, is that I'm increasingly getting uncomfortable with the throat clearing. The sort of, you have to do this throat clearing if you're not a conservative, and say, well, I didn't agree with everything that he said. Well, hold on a second. Why does one say that? I get the instinct, because you just want to be like, hey, I'm not this guy. But what is built into saying something like that is that, I didn't agree with these horrible things that he said, but, you shouldn't kill him. I mean, that kind of sentence, which presumes that there are certain, I guess, certain language that you can use where it's justified. I don't know what motivates people to say that, but I don't care. It should be, look, Ezra Klein, liberal columnist for the New York Times, who I think particularly Matt and I have had a fun time making fun of for many, many years. Matt profiled him for the Columbia Journalism Review, and it was a bit of a tough profile, but we've made fun of him for a long time for a variety of reasons. But he came out and wrote a piece and said, this is what we should be doing. This is how we argue. I think the sickness of the political culture, which is demonstrated in the assassination of a pundit, is also, there's a second wave of seeing the sickness of this culture as the reaction to it, of course. But it was the reaction from mainstream people getting mad at Ezra Klein for having that measure of grace and saying, you know what, the guy tried to engage people. You might not like what he said, and you might not like what he thought. But, this archaeology, the offense archaeology. What did Charlie Kirk say? What did he say, 10 years ago? Which, by the way, one more thing in this, I'm sorry to drone on about this, but it's all very upsetting to me, is that when you go in these archaeological expeditions to try to find bad things that Charlie Kirk said in the past, it wouldn't take long for people to find stuff that I've said. We do this for a living. We're on the air all the time. But it doesn't allow for growth, because Charlie Kirk has been doing it since he was 17 or 18 years old. I have wildly different views than I had when I was 17 or 18 years old. And I think he probably did too, not wildly so, but you're going back and trying to punish a man in death who is assassinated, and trying to find these aberrant thoughts that he had when he was 18 or 19. Guess what, guys? That's when you're allowed to have those aberrant thoughts. You should always be allowed to have them. But that's when you have things, you're working things out in your head. And now you've been gunned down in front of your family, kids left fatherless. And these vultures are out there trying to find the things that you said that were wrong. And by the way, and then misquoting you in doing so. It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace.
I totally agree with every word you just said. I want to give a shout out too, because in our business, we're always giving each other jazz, and people who are on the opposite side so much more so. But I always have been of the belief that, with the exception of maybe 2% of the people who come under my own withering criticism, I could go have a beer with 98% of them. I really could, I could check the politics to the side, and I could have a beer with them, and we could talk about things that we do agree on, whatever it is. Sports is tough for me, but I could make a showing of it if it were important to the other person. Whatever. There's a lot of stuff beyond politics. And even within politics, there are a lot of safe zones. There are people we can all agree are terrible. Eric Swalwell. Nobody likes him. It's easy. We go there.
No beer for you, Eric.
But we don't want any harm to come to him.
No, we just don't want
harm.
Exactly.
But it'd be easy to just find someone we can all agree on.
Yes. And
I wanted to just give a shout out. I hope he'll forgive me, because he didn't say it was off the record, and he didn't ask me not to say anything. But Tommy Vietor of the Pod Save America guys sent me one of the nicest notes I've received. And
nice.
It was all about
That's really good to hear.
How sad he was over Charlie, and how, he's been reflecting on his own life and his own dialogue on his show, and just how meaningful what Charlie built was to him from afar. And he did not say any of the throat clearing at all. I didn't agree with him. Not a word of that. Just I respected what he built, a man with a family, and Tommy has one too. And now he's officially my favorite Pod Save America guy. But it is important to call out, not all leftists are insane and have lost their minds, but far too many have. And far too many civilians in powerful positions, like those who are flying our planes and operating in our hospitals, have shown the mania of enjoying his death and really wanting to celebrate in it. Your thoughts on it all, Kmele?
Well, I think what you just said there reminds me of something, one of the major defects of the kind of social justice epoch of the past 5 or 6 years is the magnification of any imagined defect in the people that you most disagree with. So America just becomes utterly white supremacist, clearly irredeemable. Everything about it must be foregrounded by acknowledging in the strongest possible terms its worst imaginable failures, and in many cases just totally imagined failures. And unfortunately, much of the country has permitted itself to be kind of led around by the nose by the worst malefactors in our politics, people who have fringe ideas, who say fringe things. At times, some of those fringe things, because they've been allowed to be led around by the nose by these people, have just kind of risen to the very top. And suddenly it becomes impolitic to criticize people for, say, burning down buildings or punching Nazis in the face or whatever you prefer. I mean, you can find so many examples of this. And this just became part of our politics. And I think many people who in other contexts would have shuddered at the thought of endorsing those sentiments perhaps became a little bit more familiar with it. But there's this quote, which I believe is Nietzsche. And here we are 10 minutes in, and I'm going to try to go deep philosophical here, but it's not that profound.
We need it.
When you're fighting monsters, the thing you have to be careful of is that you don't become the monster. And I think one of the concerns that I've had very recently, and not just recently, that's true of kind of my critique of the left, is that in analyzing the fringe characters, and there are too many people in this country who endorse really disgusting views, who are celebrating the death of someone they disagree with or believe it's even appropriate to utilize violence in contexts like this, that we aren't insisting that that these people are representative of the broader opinion on the left. It is the case that well over 80% of Democrats disagree with this stuff, based on this YouGov poll that I know a number of people have been citing recently. And that 80% is, I wish it were higher. And based on the polling, it is higher amongst Republicans.
You know what we need, though, Kmele? We need that 80% to call out the 20%.
We do need that. We do need that, without a doubt. And I think there just needs to be a broad recognition across the political spectrum that this is an issue, full stop. And I do think that the left has historically, and I believe I've said it on this program and I've said it in other contexts as well, had a very difficult time acknowledging the fact that they have extremists who endorse really dangerous things on their side as well. They've spent so many years. I'm sure you guys remember all of these studies that were being trotted out in maybe 10 years ago, where they're like, oh, now we know why conservatives trend fascist. It's because of some weird defect that we could see in all of these studies. The data proves that these people are just congenitally fascist. That was despicable. It was wrong. And it was also a mistake to try to overcorrect in the other direction. And I want us to be locked into the fact that as bad as things have felt, and I felt pretty awful, even listening to you all talk at the beginning of this, I kept thinking to myself, I'm not sure I'm ready to do this again yet. I've been able to hold it together in most of these appearances, but I'm definitely not quite myself. This feels profoundly different. It makes me feel deeply uncomfortable. I can't stop thinking about Charlie and his kids. And I keep having this impulse to reach out to even people who I've had kind of public disagreements with to try to mend bridges. And if that's what comes out of this, then that's good. And I think the only way we get to that coming out of this is to acknowledge clearly most of us are totally sane.
When inflation jumps, when you hear the national debt is over $37 trillion, do you ever think maybe now would be a good time to buy some gold? Well, you'd be right. Whether as a hedge against inflation, peace of mind during global instability, or just for sensible diversification, Birch Gold Group believes every American should own physical gold. And so they created something special. Until September 30th, if you're a first-time gold buyer, Birch Gold is offering a rebate of up to $10,000 in free metals on qualifying purchases. To claim eligibility and start the process, request an info kit right now. Just text MK to 989898. Plus, Birch Gold can help you roll an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold, and you're still eligible for a rebate in free metals of up to 10 grand. So make right now your first time to buy gold and take advantage of a rebate up to $10,000 when you buy before September 30th. Text MK to the number 989898 to claim your eligibility and get your free info kit. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.